Hi everybody, here I am back again, and thank you so much for the responses to my first tutorial. That was really cool, and thank you very much for those of you that kind of PM me privately. That was fantastic, and obviously I was more than happy to answer your questions as well, which is awesome. That was the aim of it. So if it helped even one person, then I feel like I've done my job, so that's fantastic as well. I hope you've all stayed safe with all the storms, and I'm guessing obviously we've got another one on its way now as well, so I hope you've all been kind of staying safe. So we're going to do another screen share as well. I've got another tutorial to kind of go through with you, and hopefully that'll answer a few more of your questions as well. So we will start on that in 1 second. So looking now at, again, sort of obviously my Educating and Inspire series. So the first thing I want to kind of go over with you is, what are you going to teach? Okay, that's something you really do need to think about. What is it going to do? So you're going to offer the latest trend? Are you going to kind of go old school and teach the basics? Or are you going to kind of pitch yourself somewhere in between as well? So you really need to have a little think about that, because a lot of stuff changes over time as well. And again, it's coming back to that target market and things like that as well, and areas you are particularly passionate about. It doesn't have to be something new. The things that you need to take into consideration are your skills. So you must be qualified in the skills you're planning on teaching. You also need to be able to provide proof of this to the accrediting bodies as well. No matter whether that's a self-accreditation body or companies like VTCT and City and Guilds and ITEC, you need to be able to provide proof of that as well. So you do need to make sure you bear that in mind. So if you haven't seen that certificate for a little while, you're going to need to dig that out. For me, I think my best advice really to kind of give you is to stick with what you already have and stick with what you know as well. Obviously, you're good at your craft, otherwise you won't be successful in your other treatment areas and be wanting to kind of embark on teaching. And I would stick with what you know first of all. And what I would do with those areas is I would read around those subject areas in a little bit more detail, update your knowledge, particularly because the trends change a little bit as well. So I would update your knowledge on that as much as you possibly can, and make sure that you've fulfilled all the latest criteria, because a lot of things have changed. One of probably the biggest things I guess that's changed that I'm more of aware of, I guess, is the gel polish industry. So I started doing that probably kind of around 10 years ago, around about the time when the sort of Gelish first launched. Is when I first started doing that, and obviously before that we had some of the slightly different kind of gel polishy type things as well, when we were looking at things like biosculpture and cow gels and stuff before that. But we had that kind of thinner sort of viscosity, that slightly kind of difference, didn't we, in the gel polish that kind of came around 10 years ago. And obviously, you know, it was a shiny new object. We were very focused on the outcomes. We were very focused on the treatments and how we were doing it. Whereas, you know, now, you know, we are focusing quite a lot on the ingredients that are in there now. You know, we're starting to see kind of a lot of problems kind of occurring now. We're looking at different curing issues, different applications, because it kind of boomed a bit, really, didn't it? There were a few kind of key players when it first started, and then it got replicated as well. So it's really important for us as educators to make sure we have the latest information to give to our learners, and that does mean we need to read around the subject area. We need to find the information out from our industry experts. We need to get the information from our brands, and get the latest information and read up on the ingredients and things like that now as well. You know, our students need to be armed with this knowledge when they go out, and if they're not going to pick, say, the brand that you're working with, and they're going to pick another brand, they need the information as much as possible so they can make an informed decision, and they're not just being purely driven by price and going for the cheapest thing they can find, because we all know that that's not necessarily the best way to go, and doesn't necessarily mean it's better. And equally the same with something that's really expensive as well, isn't it? But we do need to make sure that, you know, they have all the knowledge that they can make an informed decision, so that they can, you know, obviously justify that with themselves and for their clients, and look at their business and have a successful business. They don't want to kind of get, you know, a few months down the road and start getting loads of teething problems with it, because it will all come back to that sort of education. And I'm sure my hairdressing colleagues as well will probably say, when like the balayage kind of first came out as well, that's changed massively as well, hasn't it? We all know the techniques have changed. I see loads of like colour melts and things like that going on now. You know, like it's way more than what it was when it first popped up onto the market as well, and it's become like a really good buzz thing, a great trend kind of setter as well. So again, that's changed. So if you were going to go and teach something like that, you need to make sure you've got, you know, the latest techniques. And if that means that having some of these latest techniques as well means that you just need to extend your teaching period a little bit more so, then that's what needs to happen to make sure you can cover all of these techniques, and make sure that your students have the best knowledge and these different techniques to kind of go out as well. So that's our job as educators, to adjust that system a little bit for them and kind of go with the flow. We've got to kind of move along with the times a little bit as well. So I know the basics don't change, Some of the kind of core die-hard kind of theory doesn't change, but the other stuff around it has changed quite significantly, and it is our job as educators to make sure we're up to date with that. How long do you need to be qualified for? Most of them will be a big sort of bare minimum of around 6 months or so. Some of them 2 to 3 years. It really depends on which accrediting bodies you're kind of working through, or awarding bodies. For me, I think it's quite skill dependent. If it's an extension of a similar kind of skill, I feel like maybe it requires a little bit less time. So sort of more 6-month kind of thing. But if I was going to embark on a new skill, for example, I haven't done anything to do with semi-permanent makeup, for example, that's like on my kind of to-do list at some point. I'm very interested in that area. But, you know, I wouldn't want to go out and do a course on that and pass my course and then suddenly start teaching it. I would imagine that if you wanted me to teach you that type of skill, you would have an expectation that I've had that for a fair few years, and that I've come across all the different teething problems and different ways of solving all those different problems, different skin types and body types and things to work with, and hair types. So, you know, it's not something I can go and start and do like, you know, with the 6-month kind of thing. But if it was an extension of a skill, and I was just topping up another kind of little thread of that skill, then I think maybe with sort of 6 months or so, you know, hard graft work, getting those case studies done, getting those different bodies in, then I think that's probably kind of a bit more doable. So I think you really need to ask yourself that question about how would you feel about that. And obviously, you know, teaching with only half the knowledge is a really, really dangerous thing as well. Not obviously only from a health and safety point of view, but it's really detrimental to your learners' development as well. And learners can do one of two main kind of things as well, actually. They don't always come back and ask you about these kind of things. It really depends on the relationship and the rapport you built up during training. So that has a really big bearing on that, because some people don't feel like they can come back and ask their trainers. Hands up, I've been on courses like that where I felt like, you know, I'm going to have to go and ask someone else. I don't feel like I can come back to you on something. So we've all probably been there, and we're probably all being guilty of that as well. So they do one of two things. They'll either figure it out on their own, trial and error, they'll keep playing, and until they get the end result that they're after. And that might happen in a safe manner or in a hygienic manner, or it might not. So there is that issue. They'll just figure it all out, go it alone, and see if they can find what works. Or they'll ask on forums. Not a problem with being on forums, because we're on one. So it's not an issue. But however, obviously, you know, forums have got a wealth of experience on there. It does depend which forums you're on, but, you know, they have a really good wealth of experience on there. Some really strong leaders from the industries in there, people that have been doing it a very long time, that are very qualified in what they do. And then there'll be a mix of people that may not be as well. And also there's a lot of different opinions then as well. So if you're quite new, it's a bit of a minefield really, isn't it? So you ask a question and like a million people come back to you with all these different answers. And you're not sure which one's true, which one's not, which one's to pick. And you might often just maybe go with maybe the easiest solution, the simplest, these kind of cost-effective kind of solution, you know, whatever it is to kind of get it done. And obviously I see that as, you know, something that, you know, us as educators need to fix that, because we need to make sure that A, they feel like they can approach us afterwards as well, and also B, that, you know, we gave them the information in the first place, so that we could help them as much as possible, that we didn't kind of, you know, give them half the information. The other problem as well I see with this is also it affects brands massively. Now I know they have their, you know, they need to look after their own and things as well. But quite often, particularly if you haven't got to do training to go and purchase a certain brand as well, then you might get people that are giving you different opinions on different ways of using something. And it can be really downgrading for a brand, and through no fault of their own as well, because people are misusing their product. And so therefore you can get problems with it, and then it becomes all about the product's fault, and not the technician and all that kind of stuff. And again, that can just be all through hearsay as well. We see a lot of product mixing, a lot of pick mixing and things like that with some stuff, and they're not designed to kind of go together, and that's not how the manufacturers and the brands decided for things to kind of go together as well. So you can see problems coming from that. And not always do your students understand that actually when a system's designed to be put together, it's supposed to be kept together with a system. We're not supposed to pluck and pick and mix things and bring something together, particularly in things like gel polish at the moment. I think that's probably the biggest kind of issue that we've got going on at the moment, of pick and mixing different systems together to give our client the one treatment. And obviously, you know, when you go back to your manufacturer's instructions, you go back to your insurance, they're not supposed to happen in that way. They do actually dictate dictate that quite a lot. In most of the insurance policies I've seen, it will say about going back to your manufacturer's instructions, and that they should be used with the designated systems and things. So, you know, it might work out okay, but who are you putting at risk for that as well? So, you know, again, us as educators, we need to make sure that they have this information, that they understand what the repercussions and the consequences are, maybe if they don't select something in quite the right way, or they pick and mix a lot of things. And that's, you know, they need that information. So we can't give them half the knowledge. We need to have all of the knowledge and read around it in context as well. We need to make sure that we've got plenty of scenarios about different problems, different ways of solving these problems as well that come up, and give them more than just what we've got on our manuals and just on our piece of paper. We do need to read around that subject area in a lot more detail. Otherwise, I think it's very dangerous for us, it's dangerous for our learners, and it's dangerous for their potential clients as well. And again, you know, things ultimately that snowballs a little bit, doesn't it? Particularly a few months or years down the line. And then that kind of puts our industries into sort of disrepute, really, doesn't it? And it gives us a bit of a bad name. So I think everything stops with kind of education, and it starts there, really, doesn't it? So we need to make sure that we're doing our bit as well. If you're teaching things like MVQs, VRQs, endpoint assessments and things like that as well for places like City and Guilds, VTCT, CIVTAC, ITEC, something like that, then you'll probably need a more formal qualification if it's available, depending on what your skills are. So not everything is available mapped over into something like that, but there is a vast majority of some things that is mapped over now, particularly the level 4 stuff that's around. So you may have to upskill if you want to teach or assess in any of that. So you might have done a day's course, say, in hot stones, and been doing it for years, but you will probably be asked by the external verifier to upskill and do the actual unit itself before you're allowed to teach and assess on that particular unit. So it is worth bearing that in mind. If you're going to go down that route, you might need to go through and just upskill a few things as well, and map that over to what I would refer to as like more of an official kind of qualification as well, something that will, you know, go internationally. So new things, before you get caught up in vying for new techniques, because let's face it, we love a new thing, don't we? And we've got so much stuff going on in our industry, and we have lots of really cool things coming onto the market, and we are pushing boundaries a lot more, and we really are trying to problem solve for our clients, you know, particularly kind of, you know, on the skin care side of things. There's a lot of new kind of things coming on board as well now, and we really are able to offer our clients a lot more, which is fantastic. But I really want you to think about, before you start looking at the new kind of things, think about what your expectations would be from your from a learning point of view. So if you were the learner and someone went off and kind of learned something quite quickly and then started teaching that as well, how would you feel about that? You know, think about how much trust you would have in that person to be able to answer your questions. So I think that's why I kind of come back to stick with what you know. You don't need loads of stuff. You don't need to add loads and loads of things to your menu. It can be something you can plan for later, and decide, actually, you know, maybe, I know, say something like brow lamination, for example. You know, maybe you're going to teach you lash and brow really well, and then you might go down to the sort of brow lamination route later. But don't make that the first thing you maybe just jump straight in at as well. You know, teach the stuff you know really well first, and get yourself well established, and then you can start looking into other things down the road, making sure you get your training in, making sure you get your practice and your case studies in as well, and do your own clientele for that before you embark on teaching it. So it gives you more time to do all your research and things like that as well. And I think probably a few salon owners as well, probably on here, can probably say that, you know, we can get caught up with having too much on our menus, can't we, sometimes? And I think us as trainers can do that too. And, you know, we can't be the jack of all trades. You know, we're not a handyman. We don't need to do every single little thing. And actually, sometimes it's better if we specialise in something. And, you know, it's what we get known for, really, as well, isn't it? It's something that, you know, we find an area that's ours, that we can be really well known for. So when you want to kind of, you know, a student sort of says, oh, I really want to learn that, they're like, right, I need to go and get to see that person, because that person's really good at that. I'm prepared to travel for that. And that's when, you know, you kind of hit a really kind of good point, is when people are, you know, prepared to travel quite far to come and see you as well for things. And that's really quite a good feeling as well. So you do need to kind of really think about that. Think about, you know, not adding too much stuff all in one go. Think about how everything's going to flow as well, and leads on to one, you know, from one treatment area to the next thing. Think about the next step for your students and your learners as well. So I really want you to kind of like leave you with the thought that, you know, you do have a wealth of knowledge already. You know, you are good at what you do. You do have a good craft. You don't need a shiny object to be successful at this. If you want to go into the teaching area, you don't need to be doing all this new, latest, trendy kind of stuff. You know, people come into this industry, they need the basics first. They need that stuff. They need these as prerequisites before they go and do the big shiny objects as well. So you do need to make sure that we've got that foundation learning in there as well, that we don't just all go off and go and teach all the really big shiny stuff as well. So, and obviously it's going to depend on your skill set and where you've come from, because there's a wealth of different people on here. And some people do have these really advanced skill sets as well, and that's fantastic. And that can be their area and their niche as well. So what my biggest kind of thing to you really is just don't get really caught up in that and see that as a money thing, because it does come across as that as well. When people are looking around at you, you've picked that from a money point of view. Think about what you can do to set someone up in the right way. What do they need first to help them get a good grounding in the industry, and to move them forward at a good kind of pace, and to things that they can offer as well, and things that are going to be their bread and butter and bring their clients returning, things that people need all of the time, before you start kind of going into anything that's kind of too shiny. Okay. If, as I said before, if you've got any questions or any comments, you can add it in the comments section, or you can PM me directly. That's fine. I don't mind you PMing me directly. That's okay. I had a couple of those last time. That's cool. I will be sending out like another one of these, so you'll find a couple a week now kind of coming out, and I'm going to be doing a few lives and things like that as well. So hop on those, give me any feedback. That's really cool. I don't mind having feedback from that. Any feedback I think is always good, isn't it? Positive or negative feedback I'm absolutely fine about. So feel free to let me know if there's anything else, or if there's something you feel like, you know, you really want me to kind of cover. I have got a nice big long plan of what I'm planning on doing, but you know, I might be able to bump it up the list a little bit if you kind of, you know, give me a bit more direction about what it is that you'd like to know. So I hope you all have a fantastic day, and I hope you all stay safe as well, with the new storms that are going to come in as well, and that, you know, your gardens and your houses are kind of intact as well. We've lost kind of a few fence panels around our end, and so we're going to kind of batten down the hatches again this weekend for when the next storm comes as well. So I hope you all stay well, and you have a really busy week.